Now we're going to focus on protists. Protists, once the name of the kingdom, has now been divided into two separate kingdoms called Kingdom Protozoa and Kingdom Chromista. Protists are considered simple eukaryotes. The reason why they're called simple eukaryotes is because not only do they have a nucleus identified by being a eukaryote, but the simple part comes in is because they're primarily unicellular. Now, some of them are multicellular, and this is going to tie in more when we get to algae, but majority of the protozoa are going to be unicellular. Now, many of those unicellular protists, when they congregate together, they cannot form a tissue. Because they're unicellular, they will form colonies or groups. Now, some of them, such as Giardia, which is beaver fever, are called choanocytic. Now, choanocytic means that it has more than one nucleus in the cytoplasm. Now, protists are considered aquatic, meaning they live in water environments, and many of these protists are divided, as we said before, into protozoa and chromis. They can be animal-like, fungus-like, or plant-like. So they have character traits that are similar to other kingdoms. Now, primarily animal-like because of the ability to move, having some form of locomotion. Now, many of them are plant-like, referring to having chloroplasts, being autotrophic. We're going to be looking at protozoa as animal-like, fungus-like, because they're heterotrophic. They can eat other things, and chromis or algae will be autotrophic. They will make their own food using chloroplasts. Now, many protists will provide food for other organisms, and then others who have chloroplasts will give off oxygen as they perform photosynthesis. We just said the words autotrophic and heterotrophic. Make sure you are reminded of what those definitions refer to. An autotroph actually makes its own food using carbon dioxide, light, and water. While heterotrophs can't make their own food, they have to eat or consume other things. And as we said, many of the animal-like protists are classified by locomotion or movement, and that's seen in three different forms or three different structures. One is called the flagella. Now, the flagella are very long, whip-like structures. There's only a few of them. You learned about that when we talked about bacteria. And then we have the cilia. Cilia are many short, hair-like structures or oar-like structures used for movement. Then we have the pseudopods. The pseudopods are false feet. Pseudo meaning false, pod meaning foot. And this is just a movement of the cytoplasm. And these organisms, such as the amoeba that has the pseudopods, they will engulf their food or their prey, and that is called phagocytosis. The prefix phago referring to engulfing or eating, and then cyte meaning cell. Let's talk about protozoa. Here you can see the flagella, and if you look closely, you can see the cilia. This is on a paramecium. And then here you can see the pseudopods, the movement of the cytoplasm of the amoeba. And you can see the tail end or the back portion is getting smaller. It's all being moved up. Okay, so from one part of the amoeba, it's being moved up. And as it surrounds, as the pseudopod surrounds its prey, that is called phagocytosis. You can see the euglena has the flagella, the chloroplasts, and it squishes its body, a form of euglenoid movement. It also has an eye spot and a protective covering. Here's the paramecium. You can see the mouth area, which is called the gullet or oral groove. You can see all the little vacuoles inside it. And here's the amoeba, the movement of the cytoplasm. You can see some vacuoles, you can see the nucleus, you can see the pseudopods. Now, the first protozoa we're going to focus on are the flagellates. These are the protists, the protozoa that have flagella. Here is Giardia, Giardia lamblia. This is also known as beaver fever. You can see the two choanocytic nuclei. You can see the flagella. If you go to giantmicrobes.com, you can actually get little stuffed animal of beaver fever. Here's trypanosoma, which causes African sleeping sickness. It's found amongst the blood cells, the red blood cells. Some other flagellates include the euglenoids, the euglena. Now, some scientists disagree and argue where the euglena should be. Should it be in algae? Should it be in protozoa? Basically, they are photosynthetic. They can make their own food. I believe they can eat other things. They can be heterotrophs, okay, as well as make their own food. As we saw in the video, the euglena can move not only with the flagella, but squishing its body, called euglenoid movement, and it can reproduce by binary fission. You will need to know these circled organelles. You did an activity focusing on these, so make sure you not only identify where they're located, but you understand their function. You were given a worksheet that has a list of all the organelles. Specifically, these are on the previous page, so make sure you're aware of the function. Now, the first protozoa we talked about were the flagellates. Now we're going to focus on the ciliates. So these have cilia. This is going to include the paramecium. Now, the paramecium specifically has two nuclei, a macro and micronucleus. The macronucleus contains metabolism, while the micronucleus contains genetic information. The micronucleus is going to be exchanged in sexual reproduction, and that process is called conjugation. You learned in bacteria a form of sexual reproduction with the pili was conjugation. The protists, specifically the paramecium, will not use a pili. They will go gullet to gullet or mouth to mouth, and they will then exchange the micronuclei. But not only that, can they do sexual reproduction of conjugation, they can also perform binary fission and separate asexually. So two paramecium can go side by side, have sexual reproduction occurring, then they can separate, and then they can go through asexual reproduction. These terms, again, you are responsible for to identify and describe. And then lastly, the amoeboids. We talked about what pseudopods are and the process of phagocytosis. And then we have fungus-like protozoa. Now, many times in many resources, they separate protists into animal-like, plant-like, and fungus-like. We're going to include the fungus-like in the protozoa because they are heterotrophs, and these heterotrophs are divided into slime molds and water molds or downy molds. And these are primarily like fungus because they decompose. They do have cell walls, they are heterotrophs, they do reproduce by spores, so they are similar to fungi. Now, Plasmodium, which is a mass of cytoplasm, is a specific example of a slime mold, and they have, like what other fungi have, in kingdom fungi, they have a fruiting body or sporangium, which holds the spores. Now, this process of asexual reproduction, basically releasing the spores, and then it has this emerging amoeba-like structure. And many of these may have even a flagella on them. So not only do they look like an amoeba, but they look a little different. They usually aggregate or collect together in a colony, and then that colony actually forms the fruiting body. But they can also go through a sexual reproduction, okay, in which they share genetic information, okay, creating a zygote, which is a merging of the two gametes. Now, water and downy molds, basically, they're fuzzy, they look like a little fungus. This mold has been known to attack crops, such as the famous Irish potato famine.